It's actually a fairly quick little section here. It's on functions, and so there's a lot of different ideas. Starting with this first one, we're just identifying functions by a couple of x, y coordinates. And so this is just a matter of making sure you can navigate the notation. So when we look for f of -1, we're going to look at function f and find out where x is -1. That y value is the answer. Okay, and you know, these are intentionally confusing to make sure that you're paying attention to the details. You know, for example, there's also a g of -1, and there's f and g are both defined at also 2. So just, you know, be careful, work slowly. So g of 1/3, so there's function g, there's x equals 1/3, that's going to be 4. F of pi, 2.7. G of 2, 3 pi, and f of 2, -2, and g of -1, that's 7. And that's really how you navigate these problems. It's kind of a weird little problem. I have never seen it. I see it rarely in math books, but they're basically looking at closed domain and range, I guess. Okay, and I'm picking the problems that I think give people trouble. So in example 2, the one thing I want you to watch out for when you're evaluating is that negative in front of the squaring. Remember, we do our exponents first, and this is basically multiplication by -1, so it will come next. Usually people, when it's a positive, they don't have any trouble. We're going to get a -9 out of that, -4, -4, which gives a -13. Same manner with f of -1. This is where I really need to be careful with the signs. So -1 squared gives me a +1. Then the negative multiplier in front turns it negative again. And f of 0 is extremely easy. It's just -4. So in a quadratic, when you're in a quadratic in standard form, if you're looking at 0, it's really just the constant, which is your answer. Okay, on to the next problem. I picked this rational function because they tend to give most people trouble. The first couple are not too bad. F of a, we're just going to throw in an a everywhere we have an x. And there's no simplifying to do, so we're done with that one. F of a plus 1 gets a little more complicated. That's going to be 1 over, so instead of x, we're going to write a plus 1. And I'm just using those parentheses for substitution. They actually don't mean anything mathematically, so they can be dropped on the next step. And what I get is a plus 2. And the last one gives us a little more trouble, f of 1/3, because what happens as soon as we substitute, we have a complex fraction. Okay, so we need to, it's expected that you simplify these complex fractions. So 1/3 plus 1, that's going to be 1/3 plus 3/3, which gives me 1 over 4/3, and we're going to flip and multiply the denominator. So we get 1 times 3/4, which is just 3/4. So whenever you're trying to simplify rational expressions, simplify the numerator, simplify the denominator, and if you have a fraction in either place, then flip the denominator and multiply. All right, this is a piecewise function, and they will always ask you the value at the break point of your piecewise function, but we'll get to that. We're going to look at f of -2. Now, our piecewise function breaks at x equals 1. Since -2 is less than 1, we will use the part of the function that's less than 1, which is -2. Let's take a look at the next one, f of 0. Also, 0 is less than 1, so we use the same function for x equals 0 and also get a -2. And the reason it doesn't change is because it's just a constant. Y equals -2. gets a little more interesting when we look at f of 1. Now we have to look for the part of the function that is equal to 1. So that is the second piece of this piecewise function. Simplify, and we are done. I'm going to stop this. I'll see you on the next video.